Here are a couple of terms seldom used in the same sentence: Greek media and success story, but we may have found one. The financial crisis that befell Greece in 2009 led to all kinds of businesses crashing and burning, newspapers included. One of those that went bankrupt and disappeared from newsstands was Eleftherotypia, one of the country's most influential dailies. Out of that paper's ashes rose another publication, Εφημερίδα των Συντακτών, στην. The paper breaks the mold in the Greek media space. The journalists run it as a collective. That means the business model and editorial process are different, adding up, the staff says, to fewer journalistic compromises. In a country where the media's reputation lies as low as an ancient ruin, FCN's circulation is growing. The Listening Post's Marcela Pizarro now from Athens on the newspaper that few thought would last.
Midnight in Athens, journalists at the newspaper Εφημερίδα των Συντακτών, στην for short, finalizing tomorrow's front page. This is a publication unlike any other in Greece. It's run as a cooperative. Everyone around this table owns a share of the paper. Many of them pulled together personal funds to launch it 4 years ago. Editors are voted in, and everyone gets paid the same. Apart from the director, Nikolas Voulelis, he came out of retirement to invest his time in this project for free. So when FCN's journalists say they have a personal investment in their stories, they mean it quite literally.
FCN, the journalist journal, this is the exact translation in English, is an independent paper with no ownership, with no magnate behind, no party behind, no government. It is a collective property.
Η Εφημερίδα των Συντακτών είναι ένα πείραμα.
EFSIN is an experiment. It's difficult sometimes because we had no previous experience, and it's hard to be a journalist and a proprietor at the same time because we are all part of every single process, from the production to the printing to the delivery.
Διακίνηση από το πρακτορείο.
Traditionally, a Greek newspaper would be owned by a wealthy businessman with various interests, and traditionally the newspaper would be seen as a vehicle to exercise political influence, to gain contracts. So now for someone to come along and say, actually, what we're going to do is that all the people who work here are going to own the newspaper and make the decisions together, really, turns that model on its head.
Greece is a small country of 11 million people. Until recently, it had an outsized media sector, 39 national dailies, 23 national Sunday papers, and 8 national TV channels. But since the financial crisis hit in 2009, the economy has shrunk by a quarter, advertising has slumped, and, like other countries around the world, the media bubble burst. Only in Greece, the media implosion was much worse than elsewhere.
Ο χώρος γνώρισε μια πρωτοφανή καταστροφή.
The entire sector witnessed an unprecedented disaster. Television stations and newspapers shut down. And as the crisis got deeper, you'd have expected Greek society to support the media, since people would want to stay informed. Yet the circulation of Sunday papers fell by 500,000, while TV viewership also plummeted.
Και μείωσε τις τηλεθέσεις στους τηλεοπτικούς σταθμούς.
Πρώτα έκλεισε μια πολύ μεγάλη εφημερίδα.
First, a very large newspaper closed, Eleftheros Typos. Then, a second newspaper, Apogevmatini, closed. But journalists didn't really realize what was happening. Then, at the beginning of the crisis, a very large TV channel, Alter, and a very large newspaper, Eleftherotypia, shut down. That was the beginning of the end of a whole era. What we were left with was scorched earth.
Μιλάμε για ένα βομβαρδισμένο τοπίο.
The closure of Eleftherotypia, Greece's second most widely read paper, came as a shock. The paper had been a symbol of what Greeks call metapolitefsi, a new phase of Greek democracy after a 7-year dictatorship that ended in 1974.
Υπήρχε και τότε.
Back then, the media lacked credibility because most newspapers had supported the regime. In 1975, Eleftherotypia was published for the first time after journalists got together and mobilized. It started as a newspaper managed by its employees, journalists, but it didn't work financially, so it was replaced by the more traditional businessman, publisher, employer model. Yet journalists kept the right to express their opinion. The paper stood out for this until the very end.
Ελευθεροτυπία από όλο τον άλλο ελληνικό τύπο.
Η μόνη διαφορά, και αυτό είναι νομίζω που εγγυώνει.
The only difference at Eleftherotypia was that the editor remained an editor. He didn't own ships, he didn't build roads or take on public works contracts. But this could also have been one of the causes of the paper's collapse. Because Eleftherotypia took a critical stance against the bailouts, while at the same time depending on banks. Eventually, the banks refused the paper liquidity, something like 11 million euros. When you consider that there are media outlets here whose debts amount to €500 million, what happened to this paper was not coincidental.
Άρα δεν ήταν τυχαίο αυτό που του συνέβη.
Once Eleftherotypia closed shop, journalists from the paper came together to try and recreate its original vision, a publication run by its journalists. In 3 years, the paper circulation figures have climbed by 30%, as others have fallen by roughly the same rate. And Efsin's weekend sales are second only to the country's leading national paper, Danea. Many say that's because the paper has ignored the red lines. Other mainstream outlets are too compromised to cross. It's not that newspapers in Greece don't cover things, they do. But ever since the financial crisis of 2010, it would have been the media's role to hold government and business to account. But people here see journalism as just part and parcel of what they call an unholy alliance, a triangle of power between government, business and the media. It was the leftist Syriza government that coined that term, unholy alliance. When they came into power at the beginning of 2015, they vowed to dismantle it. Just this month, the government cut the number of national TV channels from 8 to 4 in a move they say will cut down on corruption and better regulate the market.
Traditionally, the Greek media was built around political alliances, and one of the big criticisms of the way that newspapers operated was that they supported one political party or the other, and that when that party was in power, it returned the favor by granting advertising, granting state contracts to owners who also happen to own public works.
Τα media στην Ελλάδα ήταν σε κρίση πριν.
The Greek media were already in a series of crises before the crisis. There was an economic one and a crisis of public trust. During the bailouts, the media chose to support austerity policies.
Για το καλό όλων, ελπίζω το Ταμείο να κρατήσει αρκετά γερά.
The policies that led to over 1 million people losing their jobs, 2.5 million left with no access to the National Health Service, around 500,000 young people forced to emigrate. The media, journalists betrayed the citizens.
Πρόδωσαν οι δημοσιογράφοι, πρόδωσαν τους πολίτες.
In 2013, Dina Daskalopoulou spent 3 months in Skouries in northern Greece after protests erupted there over a Canadian multinational mining project. That reporting was scant elsewhere came as no surprise. Greece's largest construction group, which jointly ran the mining projects, is owned by Georgios Bobolas. Greeks call tycoons like him part of the entangled because he also owns multiple mainstream media outlets in the country.
Εκεί δώσαμε φωνή.
In this case, we gave locals the voice that they had been deprived of. We also frequently refer to issues that our advertisers may not necessarily like. For example, the pollution generated by the Hellenic petroleum refineries. We've made it clear that advertisers' interests will not be intervening in our stories, no matter what.
Ό,τι και να θέλει ο διαφημιστής.
Η Εφημερίδα των Συντακτών
Efsin actually excels in certain types of stories, mainly social ones which are now absent from mainstream media. Stories on migrants, education, refugees. I think that this is why Efsin's circulation has risen. But we need to make sure that this lasts, and that's going to take a lot of persistence.
διάρκεια και επιμονή.
Because in Greece, a disentangled kind of journalism not owned by corporations or dictated to by them, journalism that looks to represent the voices on the margins, that kind of journalism is in high demand, but in short supply.